Yeah.
Alright. Better.
They just turn that light off, actually. Hey guys, we turn that light off. The switch is all the way in the back. There you go. You can never listen to Master of Puppets ever again.
I heard a snippet of that song.
They just, yeah, I'm not doing it again. I'm like, I'm just gonna tell all the actors, like, hey, come do this. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. Because that's what we were supposed to do, is find actors to do it for them, and just kind of direct the scene. But I'm like, everybody's writers. It's so hot.
Dude, no, but we all got sick after that
They
too.
need to do it like
I think
in
it
the.
was
They
the
need to do it
fog.
like in the.
The
yeah.
fog machine there.
Like I would just hack it up.
They need to do it in like the civic center, you know? Like just turn the lights off, like do like an indoor thing.
Doing the one that's in the tent, whatever the tent that was here.
Oh,
So that's
yeah.
where I was last year, and the rain couldn't get on the ground, so all of the dirt just turned. And so every single night I was wearing a mask because it was 2021, so I was wearing a mask the entire time. At the end of the night, I would take my mask off.
I might react to that because I didn't think
And
about
like
how
I
it
was
works,
just
but when you said it, I'm like,
did not like blow my nose.
Yeah.
Until I finally was like, can we just take the hose and go through here? And they were like, oh yeah, sure. So we got the ground wet fine.
That's good. Oh my God.
So I pulled in one day for it, like I ran over like a bottle of Fireball and Turns, you went up there. Like a fully empty bottle, like Jesus Christ, someone was drinking up a
Yeah.
$1,600 worth of organs.
Which in today's money is about $8,600.
Oh shit.
You bought almost $9,000 worth of organs in today's money.
Yo, I got like that.
Which is 450.
I got an orchid.
She ordered
I got
this
an
What
orchid.
kind of organ?
I got a guy for everything.
I did the cheapest. I did the $20 organ, which is the
cheapest.
cheapest. So if you
Okay.
wanted the cheapest, you bought
Oh, I'm not gonna
Wait,
get
he's
a
gonna
woman
guess
like
that
Karen
he's gonna have
Andre
some,
the
like,
cheapest
fine-
flowers.
They said they could be up to
Rare
50 or
or-
Cody.
$60.
Yeah, she's
got
Do you get my
a cookie
briefcase?
with that?
I'll
dating
fall
one
under
of
my
the
desk.
richest men in the world. Yeah,
There's no briefcase up there. Where's it at?
It's
It's
okay.
me.
Oh, underneath this
I got it.
table.
High grade or 50. So that means,
That's funny.
so that
I
means
like
in
this
today's
math.
money, if you did $50 organs, which are expensive,
The big one.
it's $22,000.
Yeah, it's that one.
Individual flower, like one flower.
The things you do for love.
At the flower shop that I
Sir?
was at, they did one sold for about $75.
Yeah, man.
So like they would be like this tall and the whole stem would be $75.
So 50 would probably like small.
You think you're gonna break
Yeah.
up, but instead you're gonna
It's kind of insane how expensive flowers are.
Yeah.
to make you look.
Flowers that are also really hard to the average person to wear hair out for.
Pick up
Yeah.
one more
And
case.
most of them are cut flowers.
That's.
So, no
There's
matter
that.
what you do, they're
Go to
gonna
Morrison, there's
Spend
no
$75 to plant.
Okay. Well, that might last.
We'll see. Well, I mean, we should have a good amount of people. So I just want to make sure that they're for it.
I have, I think, 3 or 4.
Do you turn the lights off in the beginning, or is that Cody?
It's Cody, but I'll make sure
Okay.
that we
Well,
do this.
yeah.
Like that's $100.
Just to remind you, just
The
to
films we did
Yeah, just fully
was
dim.
18, so.
That's this.
Just gonna make it pretty.
I was gonna say, if you are painted once, $8 a person for once, Jesus Christ.
No, I'll probably count these up and go to Morrison and be like, hey, I got these ones. So I have the guilt inside.
After party Rachel's.
Oh, there's coming.
Dwight's not coming, he said he won't be here before 7, so
Okay.
I just told him to stay. So, yeah,
Next
just.
one.
It's no added work.
Go up there, sounds like Slick Blade. Earl Flynn.
Well, his
Got no gas in it. You got no fuel. Yeah. The doors are open.
Yeah, I think most people that
Yeah,
I know
they
are
pretty
coming
much.
tonight don't play online.
Good, good, good.
Well, there's the funny moment.
Kid.
Last time I was going home, they were dumping out like all the like buckets of just mixed beer, trash and shit. I was like, all right, it'll save me some of that jungle juice over here, cozy. And they're like, you good to drive, man? I was like, if I wasn't good to drive, could I do this? I was just like,
Jesus.
and I just started doing the dance. I was like, yeah, I guess he's good.
G baby. Put this in your purse. I don't want to sit on it.
Welcome. Get your pick of seats.
Hello.
Is this your first time to this location?
Yeah.
Yeah. The last one. What was the last one? What was the last one you came to? Many came to? No? Oh, no, here. Oh, all the stuff. Okay. Oh, you were here at least once. Alright, so popping the cherry. Fear the cloud. Yep.
No, over there.
What's up, Mark?
Oh, man, I was busy. I was so tired. I was so
Hi,
tired.
how are you?
1 o'clock.
Yeah. I tried to. Freaking Jonathan won't let me leave.
Jonathan tends to never let me.
I know. Like, come on, guy.
I got rehearsal, so I gotta show
Shit
tomorrow.
to do.
Photo back that has,
I woke up, my neck was killing me. I was like, that's all the messages. Like, ah, Jay,
And I was just like, show at 5:30.
Yeah, I thought I was like, oh crap, I have to tell him. Because I kind of pieced out real fast.
Yeah. All good. We didn't lose anyone, so.
rode the purple.
Hello.
Used to pick up a trailer. So for about
That thing was just
still there behind the high school.
weather and bad traffic.
Had an agreement with him before he could do school. I want to tear the side off of the garage door and use it as a community like band thing, and I'll park it in the parking lot at the Bruising Blues every time.
Yeah.
And we had it all kind of worked out, and something happened. Yeah, they couldn't just give it to me unless I was a nonprofit. So I'm not gonna create a nonprofit.
Go.
So
Hey, handsome.
right. You would cut the whole setup. So
How's it going?
the band heads collects garage doors.
You listen to your support by watching our children?
But anyway,
And then
he's gonna watch the garage door. But then there could be some garage door setup. We open it up. It used to be a stage for cool shit.
And
In the parking lot of travel stage. Could still happen.
But, didn't you know? I forgot.
I just threw up in the last
You told
one.
me your word.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
How you doing? Good to see you. It all came out in one big sentence.
What's up, bud? Hey, man. How you, brother?
How's it going?
This one.
Yeah,
We're all hugging.
Yeah.
Alright.
It's the handshake hug equivalent of the handshake Christmas.
That's the noise I heard.
But, you know, when you do that, you just go.
Are these, available?
When it came up,
I can skip one.
his step.
Alright, we're two. No, it's just me.
I'm the only, my mom, she was.
He's talking to his son. I was like, your dad was 1 year.
Three there? And my mom.
Yeah. Well, 2 years.
Are those three available?
Yeah, and then I
Yeah. It's weird how that's. Did you run the whole thing?
Yeah, that's very neat.
I did a paper once about the judge, Katie.
your number fell 6 years. If you needed me.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it now, just get it in shape. I was there then.
Well, I definitely still listen.
Did you?
It's
Oh.
like a t-shirt or something that says
Gene.
church. Here's how.
But you don't even, how do you just?
After all these years.
You know, yeah.
I don't,
So just say it's yours. It's yours at this point. Is it?
You wouldn't regret it. I did. I saw her one day, I'm walking down the street. And this small That was fun stuff. I was going down. Green Cove Spring. We did a competition on Spring Station. When I was driving down that road the other day, to get to a job site. Hey, shopping mall.
Okay. Yeah, cause I've been doing it.
Anybody's gonna be interested can tell you the value of these.
Yeah, well, and I randomized.
But I'm saying you can help you that way, but this guy knows.
Yeah, I saw these guys.
But this, if there's any value, this guy will be able to tell you what they make it all. What's a good time to catch you for that? Like, what's a better time? 30 week.
Anytime in the world.
February.
You got first time here? Here? Yeah. But if it wasn't planted, right, then nothing you do.
Drop them off in 4 days, almost 90 degrees Celsius.
They're just sitting on the ground.
They're sitting on the ground.
Yeah, I'm gonna be there. And then, make sure that somebody, I'm gonna do it all night long. Post that price, $900. No, I'm talking about post that. You can't charge the state more than $2,000.
They were $3,600 each. Who we did the US. Those are two I don't know how this changed.
Well, it is all, it is. Get them.
I got it.
Hey guys, how's it going? Oh, I didn't. And I did. I've been on your so it's 100 bushels. 3 gallons. I'm planning to make up. They're sitting guys in and knock off the foot off the top of the I'm like, that would have been so easy to get.
For you? Yeah, I don't know what they do. I don't know what they do. I'm sure that's not okay.
Oh, yes, I do that, yes. That was a big
How's everybody doing today? Good. Thank you so much for coming out to our second to last performance. Tomorrow is our last performance of the show. Before we begin the show, we'd like to ask everyone to turn their phones on silence. There's no flash photography during the production. Also, on your programs, you have a number, so you possibly could be selected for the jury. When the bailiff calls your number, you'll stand up and sit here in the front.
And bathrooms are over here to the right, down these halls. So I'm Mark Williams. I'm the theater director here at Theater and Cloud. And we would like to thank one of our sponsors, Dave Askew, with his Q Jewelry. And handsome back there. And yeah, we really have had a lot of fun doing this show and like just playing off of each other. And yeah, we would just love for you guys to start following us on Facebook, Instagram, you know, for all of our future shows and auditions if you enjoy it. So,
We'll be starting here in 5 minutes.
guys.
Enjoy, everybody.
Court attention. All rise. Superior Court, number 11 of the state of Florida, the Honorable Judge Heath presiding.
You may be seated. State of Florida versus Karen Andre.
Ready, Your Honor?
Ready, Your Honor.
Mr. Bailiff, draw a jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will draw 5 numbers. You will be the jurors in this case. Kindly step up here and take your seats and receive your instructions from Judge Heath. Juror number 2. Juror number 22. Juror number 34. Juror number 17. And juror number 7.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're the jurors who will try this case. At its close, the bailiff will bring you into the jury room. I ask you to listen to the testimony to the best of your ability and integrity. You are to figure out whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty, and her fate rests in your hands. The district attorney may now proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on January 16th, near midnight, as the bright lights of Main Street blazed in electric dawn over the bustling crowd below, the body of a man came hurtling through space and crashed, a disfigured mess, at the foot of the Faulkner building. That body was Sweden's great financier, Bjorn Faulkner. He fell 50 stories from his luxurious penthouse apartment. A suicide, we're told. A great man unwilling to bend before his imminent ruin. A man who found the fall from the roof of a skyscraper shorter and easier than his descent from the tottering throne as the world's financial dictator. Only a few months ago, behind every big gold transaction in this world stood that well-known figure. Young, tall, with an arrogant smile, kingdoms and nations in the palm of one hand and a whip in the other. If gold was this world's lifeblood, then Bjorn Faulkner, holding all of its hidden arteries, regulating its ebb and flow, its every pulsation, was the heart of the world. And well, ladies and gentlemen, the world has just had a heart attack, and like all heart attacks, it came rather sudden. No one could have guessed at the gigantic swindle that lay at the foundation of the Faulkner enterprises. Days before his death, the earth shook from the crash of his business, and thousands of investors rolled over and were stricken with the paralysis which follows an attack when that monstrous heart stopped beating. Bjorn Faulkner had a hard struggle to face in this world, ladies and gentlemen, but he had an even harder struggle to face in his heart. A struggle that this trial will try to uncover. 2 women ruled his life, and death. Here is one of them, ladies and gentlemen, Karen Andre, his efficient secretary and notorious mistress. But a few months ago, Mr. Faulkner came to America to get a loan and save his fortune, and fate sent him a means to save his own heart, in the form of a lovely young woman who is now his widow, Nancy Lee Faulkner, only daughter of John Graham Whitfield, our great philanthropist. Faulkner thought that he had found salvation in the virtuous innocence of his young bride, and best proof of it is that 2 weeks after his wedding, he dismissed his secretary, Karen Andre. He was through with her, ladies and gentlemen. But one is not so easily through with a woman like Karen Andre. We can only guess at what hatred and revenge smoldered in her heart and leapt into flame on January 16th. Bjorn Faulkner did not commit suicide, ladies and gentlemen. He was murdered. Murdered by the very delicate and capable hands which you see here before you today. The hands that helped raise Faulkner high above the world, and the hands that threw him down from as great a height, only to crash into a pavement as cold as this woman's heart. And that is what we are going to prove. Our first witness will be Dr. Kirkland.
Dr. Kirkland. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Kindly state your name,
Thomas Kirkland.
your occupation.
I'm medical examiner of this county.
Over the course of your duties on January 16th, what were you called upon to do?
I was called to examine the body of Bjorn Faulkner.
And what did you find?
A body mangled to an extreme degree.
What did you establish as the cause of death?
A fall from a great height.
Could you tell how long the body had been dead once you reached it?
I reached the body about half an hour after the fall.
And judging by the condition of the body, could you tell how long it had been dead?
No, owing to the unusually cold temperatures, the blood had begun to coagulate almost immediately, making the difference of several hours impossible to detect.
Therefore, it is possible that Faulkner had been dead longer than half an hour.
It is possible.
Could his death have been caused by anything other than this fall?
Well, I found no evidence of it.
For instance, if the skull had been broken before the fall, would you have been able to tell when examining the body?
No, owing to the condition of the body, that would have been impossible to detect.
Thank you, doctor, that is all.
Dr. Kirkland, did you find any trace of any such earlier wound in your examination of the body?
No, I did not.
Did you find any indication that death might have been caused by anything other than the fall, Dr. Kirkland?
No, I did not.
That's all. Thank you, Doctor.
Dr. Kirkland, you're dismissed.
The prosecution's next witness will be John Hutchins.
John Hutchins. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I do.
Your name
John Joseph Hutchins.
and your occupation.
I'm the night watchman in the Faulkner building,
Did
ma'am.
Mr. Faulkner have business offices in that building?
Yes,
And do you know who owned the penthouse at the roof of the building?
certainly. Mr. Faulkner did.
And who lived there?
Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre, that is before Mr. Faulkner's marriage.
And after the marriage?
After the marriage, Miss Andre lived there, alone.
Did you ever see Mr. Faulkner calling on Miss Andre after his marriage?
Only once.
And when was that?
On the night of January 16th.
Please tell us about it, Mr. Hutchins.
Well, it was about 10:30.
How did you know the time?
I come on duty at 10, ma'am, and it was no more than a half an hour later. The entrance doorbell rang. I went down to the lobby and opened the door. Miss Andre was there, and Mr. Faulkner was with her. Right off, I figured that was unusual because she has a key, and usually she opens the door herself.
Was she alone with Mr. Faulkner?
No, there were two other gentlemen with them.
And who were they?
I don't know.
Well, had you ever seen them before?
No, never.
What did they look like?
One was about average height with wavy hair and blue eyes, and the other, I couldn't see his face at all on account of his hat being all crooked over his eyes. He must have had a bit too much, meaning no disrespect.
Just what do you mean?
Well, he was a bit tight, ma'am, if I'm permitted to say so. So much so that Mr. Faulkner and the other gentleman had to help him.
Did Mr. Faulkner look worried?
No, on the contrary, he seemed very happy.
Did he look like a man contemplating suicide?
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained.
Did the other members of the party seem happy too?
Yes, Miss Andre was smiling and Mr. Faulkner laughed when they went up in the elevator.
And did you see any of them leave that night?
Yes, the first one about 15 minutes later.
Who was that?
The drunken one, ma'am. He didn't seem quite so drunk. He came down in the elevator all by himself. He could walk, but he staggered a little.
Did you see where he went?
Well, I wanted to help him to the door, seeing the condition he was in, but he noticed me coming and hurried out. He got into a car parked right at the entrance, and did he step on it, but I'm sure he didn't get far. The cops must have got him.
What makes you think that?
Well, I noticed a car that started right after.
What car?
The defendant will please keep quiet.
If Miss Andre will allow me to do the questioning, I may be able to satisfy her curiosity. I was just about to ask, what car, Mr. Hutchins?
It was a big black sedan, ma'am.
And
It
who was
parked
in it?
2 cars away from him. I saw only one man.
And what makes you think that he was after the first car?
Well, I couldn't be sure that he was. It just seemed funny that they both started together like that.
And did you see the other guests of Miss Andre's leave too?
Yes, 10 minutes later.
And what did he do?
He came down in the elevator. Nothing unusual. He seemed to be in a hurry. He went right out.
And then what happened?
I started on my round of the building, and it must have been an hour later. I heard screams outside in the street. I rushed into the lobby, and Miss Andre was coming out of the elevator, her gown all torn, sobbing wild-like, so I ran after her. We pushed the crowd outside, and there was Mr. Faulkner all over the pavement.
What did Miss Andre do?
She screamed and fell on her knees. It was awful, ma'am. I've never seen a body smashed like that.
That is all, Mr. Hutchins.
Mr. Hutchins, thank you for being here. You said that Mr. Faulkner had been calling on Miss Andre after his marriage, with the exception of that night. Now tell me, do you always see every visitor who comes into the building at night?
No, I'm not in the lobby all the time. I have my rounds to make. If someone has a key, they could come in and I wouldn't see them at all.
In other words, Miss Andre might have had any number of visitors, Mr. Faulkner included, whom you never saw come in?
Yes, sir. Quite right.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Hutchins.
Mr. Hutchins, you're dismissed.
Our next witness will be Homer Van Fleet.
Homer Van Fleet. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Your name, sir?
Homer Herbert Van Fleet,
Your occupation?
private investigator.
What was your last assignment?
Shadowing Mr. Bjorn Faulkner.
And by whom were you hired to do so?
By Mrs. Bjorn Faulkner.
Were you shadowing Mr. Faulkner on the night of January 16th?
I was.
Please tell us about it.
I'll start with 6:13 p.m.
How did you know the time, Mr. Van Fleet?
Part of my duties. I was to record it and report it to Mrs. Faulkner.
I see.
6:13 p.m. Mr. Faulkner leaves home. Wears formal dress suit, drives car alone. Special notation, unusual speed.
And where does Mr. Faulkner go?
He drives up to the Faulkner building. It's now 7:57 p.m. All offices are closed and I wait out in my car. 9:35 p.m. comes around and he comes out with Miss Andre. Miss Andre is dressed formally. Special notation. Miss Andre is wearing a corsage of orchids of unusual proportion. They both drive away.
And then where do they go?
Well, no one's perfect in this world.
What do you mean?
I mean, I lost them due to Mr. Faulkner's speed and to an accident.
What accident?
My left fender hit in a truck, to which accident Mrs. Faulkner was charged.
What did you do when you lost track of them?
I returned to the Faulkner building and waited.
And when did they return?
10:30 p.m. exactly. A gray coupe followed them. Mr. Faulkner gets out and helps Miss Andre. And while she rings the bell, he helps out a gentleman with long hair. And together they help out a third gentleman, the latter wearing a dark gray sports coat. They all went into the Faulkner building. Special notation. The aforementioned gentleman shows signs of inebriation.
Then what did you do?
I left my car and I go into Gary's Grill, across the street from the Faulkner building. I must advise that every 4 hours I take nourishment and 4 hours have passed. I sit at the window and watch the Faulkner entrance door.
What do you observe?
Nothing. For 15 minutes. Then the man in the gray sports coat comes out and starts the car. The gray coupe, obviously in a hurry, and drives south.
Did you see the other stranger leave too?
Yes, 10 minutes later. He gets in a car that stands at the curb. I don't know how it got there, but there it is, and apparently he has the keys. He gets in and drives south.
Have you ever seen these men with Mr. Faulkner before?
No, first time I'd ever seen him.
And what did you do when they left?
I wait. Mr. Faulkner is now alone in the penthouse with Miss Andre. I'm curious, professionally. Decide to get a closer look. Have an observation post. I'd used it before.
Where was that?
The Skytop. That's a nightclub. Roof of the Brooks building. 3 doors down from Faulkner's. You go out and you can see the Faulkner building as clear as the palm of your hand. When I go out, I look and I yell.
Why? What did you see?
No lights. Karen Andre's dress is shimmering in the moonlight. She's hoisting a man's body up. A man in evening clothes. It's Faulkner. He's unconscious. No resistance. She pushes him with all of her strength. He goes over the parapet. Down. Into space.
And then what did you do?
I run back in the dining room and yell about what I had seen. When we get to the foot of the Faulkner building, we find a bloody mess all over the pavement and Miss Andre sobbing over it, fit in the mood of a first night's audience.
Did you speak to Miss Andre?
No, I report to the police what I've seen, as I've told you here.
Your witness?
Mr. Van Fleet, can you kindly tell us, when did you start in the employ of Mrs. Faulkner?
October 13th, last.
And can you tell us what was the date of Mr. and Mrs. Faulkner's wedding?
October 12th, just the day before.
Exactly, just the day before. So, in other words, Mrs. Faulkner hired you to spy on her husband the day after their wedding.
So it seems.
What was Mrs. Faulkner's instructions when you were hired?
To record every action of Mr. Faulkner and report it in detail.
Any special attention to Miss Andre?
Not specified.
Had Mr. Faulkner been calling on Miss Andre after his wedding?
Yes, frequently.
In the daytime?
Seldom.
Did you report that to Mrs. Faulkner?
I did.
What was Mrs. Faulkner's reaction to these reports?
Mrs. Faulkner is a lady, and as such, she has no reactions.
Did she seem worried?
I don't believe so. Mr. Faulkner was the most devoted of husbands and loved his wife dearly.
Just how do you know that?
Well, those are Mrs. Faulkner's own words.
Now, Mr. Van Fleet, can you tell us exactly when did you start for the Skytop nightclub on the evening of January 16th?
11:32 exactly.
And about how long a walk is it from the Faulkner building to the Skytop?
About 3 minutes.
And what time was it when you came out to the balcony at the Skytop?
11:57.
So it took you exactly 25 minutes to get to the balcony. Mr. Van Fleet, what were you doing the rest of the time?
Well, the Skytop has a dance floor and other things.
Did you take advantage of the other things?
Well, I just had a couple of drinks, if I'm catching the drift of your curiosity, but that's not to say I was intoxicated.
I said nothing of the kind, as yet. Now, then, you said you saw Miss Andre pushing Mr. Faulkner off the roof, and it was a little distance away, in the darkness, and you were, well, shall we say you just had a couple of drinks?
The drinks had nothing to do with
Are you
it.
quite certain that she was pushing him? Isn't it possible that she was struggling with him?
It's a rather strange way of struggling, if you ask me.
If I were struggling with a man, I wouldn't be hoisting him up by me.
Mr. Van Fleet, what were Mrs. Faulkner's instructions to you before you came here to testify
I
today?
received no instructions of any kind. Mrs. Faulkner is not here to instruct me were she inclined to do so. Mr. Whitfield has taken her to California to rest her shattered nerves.
I see. Mr. Van Fleet, can you tell us, do you think that Mr. Faulkner's suicide is very flattering to Mrs. Faulkner?
We object.
Objection sustained.
Can you tell us how much a witness to Mr. Faulkner's murder would be worth to
Your
Mrs.
Honor,
Faulkner?
we object.
Objection sustained.
I would like to remind Mr. Stevens that he may be sued for making insinuations such as these.
I made no insinuation, Mr. Van Fleet. I merely asked a question in a general way.
Well, I'd like to inform you in a general way that perjury is not a part of a private investigator's duties.
No special notation to the rule.
None.
That's all. Thank you, Detective.
Not quite. I want you to ask him 2 more questions, Stevens.
Certainly, Miss Andre, what is it? Miss Van Fleet, what kind of car do you drive?
A brown Buick Coupe, last year's model, old but serviceable.
And did you see any car following the gentleman in the gray coat when he drove away?
I cannot recall that I did. The traffic was quite heavy at the time.
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Van Fleet, you're dismissed.
The prosecution's next witness is Detective Sweeney.
Detective Sweeney. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Your name
Elmer Sweeney,
and your occupation.
police detective.
On January 16th, were you called upon to investigate the death of Bjorn Faulkner?
Yes, sir. Pardon, ma'am. I was one of the first officers on the scene.
And did you speak to Miss Andre?
No, not at first. That fellow Van Fleet came rushing over to us, going on about how he'd seen Karen Andre throw Faulkner off the roof.
How did Miss Andre react to this?
She was stunned. She stood there, smacked, eyes fit to burst, and crossed my heart, she started laughing. I thought she'd gone mad.
What did you do?
Well, I ordered her held for questioning, brought her with us in the lift, up to the elevator, up to the pit house. Very posh. by the
Did
way.
you find anything unusual there?
Yes, sir. Pardon, ma'am. In the bedroom.
Ah, the bedroom. And
Yes.
what was that?
Nightgowns, lace nightgowns, made out of practically thin air. There was a crystal bathtub in the bathroom, and when we turned the water on in the shower, it was perfumed.
I beg your pardon, Detective. I think that you may have misunderstood my line of questioning. I wasn't referring to the aesthetic value of the penthouse. I was referring to if you found anything unusual that could be connected with the death of Bjorn Faulkner.
Ah, yes, in the living room.
And what was that?
A letter lying on a table in plain sight, sealed, and addressed to whomsoever should find this first.
Is this the letter?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Will you kindly read it to the jury?
If any future historian wants to record my last advice to humanity, I'll say that I found only 2 enjoyable things on this earth whose every door was open to me. My whip over the world and Karen Andre. For those who can use it, the advice is worth what it has cost mankind. Signed, Bjorn Faulkner.
Thank you, Detective. Submitted as evidence.
Accepted as Exhibit A.
Did you question Miss Andre about this letter?
We did. She said that Faulkner had written it, gave her explicit instructions not to touch it. Then, when he went out to the roof garden, she saw what he was going to do, followed him, but wasn't able to stop him.
Did you ask her if there had been anyone with them that night?
We did. She said that 2 gentlemen had, that they'd never met her, she'd never seen them before. They were friends of Faulkner's. He picked them up at a nightclub earlier in the evening, brought them along with him. She said their names were Jerry White and Dick Saunders.
And did you try to find any gentlemen by these names amongst Mr. Faulkner's acquaintances?
We did, and we found that no one had ever heard of them.
And Miss Andre told you, as she did the inquest, that she had never seen these 2 men before?
Yes.
Was she very insistent upon this?
Yes, very.
That is all.
Detective, you said that Miss Andre told you she struggled with Mr. Faulkner to prevent his suicide. Now tell me, did you notice any evidence of a struggle in her clothing?
Yes, her dress had diamond shoulder straps. One of them had been broken.
And what did
well, she had to hold the dress up with one hand, actually.
And what did you think of that?
Do I have to answer that?
You certainly do.
Well, I wish the other one had been broken as well.
No, I meant, did it look as though the dress had been torn in a struggle?
Yes, in a struggle indeed.
Now, detective, can you tell us why on earth did you turn the shower on in the bathroom?
Well, you see, me and the boys, we'd heard Faulkner had wine in there instead of water.
Detective, you and the boys mustn't believe all the legends you hear about Bjorn Faulkner.
Obviously.
That's all. Thank you, detective.
Detective Sweeney, you're dismissed.
Our next witness will be Magda Svensson.
Magda Svensson. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
What is your name?
You know it, you just call me.
Kindly answer my question without argument and state your name.
Magda Svensson.
Your occupation?
I am housekeeper.
And by whom were you last employed?
By Herr Bjorn Faulkner, and before that his father.
How long had you been employed by them?
I've been in the family 38 years. I remember Herr Bjorn when he was a little child.
When did you come to America?
I've been here 5 years.
What were the duties assigned to you by Mr. Faulkner?
I keep pen house for him. He visits here every year or so, and I stay even after he go, when he get married. But I never employed like that one.
Now, Mrs. Svensson,
Miss Svensson.
I beg your pardon, Miss Svensson. What do you know about Miss Andre's relations to Mr. Faulkner?
Decent woman like me shouldn't know about such things. But sin is shameless in this world.
Can you please tell us about it, Miss Svensson?
The very first day this woman appeared, she's sleeping with Herr Faulkner. It isn't a good thing when a man forgets the line between his bed and his desk. Some days, they talked loans and dividends in bed. And other days, the door to his office was locked, and underneath the window shades that was pulled down, I see lace panties on the windowsill.
Your Honor, we object.
I think Miss Andre should have objected years ago.
Such line of testimony is outrageous.
These are vital questions pertaining to the nature of the...
Silence. She'll ask the witness to word her testimony more carefully, please.
Sin is sin, any name you call it, Judge.
Miss Svensson, can you give us an instance where Miss Andre's conduct would have been detrimental to Mr. Faulkner in other ways than moral?
You try to count all money he wastes on that woman.
Can you give us an example of this extravagance?
I tell you, he had a platinum gown made for her. Yes, I said platinum. Fine mesh, fine and soft as silk. She wore it on her naked body. He would make a fire in the fireplace and heat up the dress and then put it on her. It cooled, you could see her body in silver sheen. It'd been more decent had she been naked. And she asked to put it on as hot as she could stand. If it burned her shameless skin, she laughed like the pagan she is, and he'd kiss the burn. Wild like a tiger.
Your Honor, we object. This line of testimony is irrelevant and only tends to prejudice the jury against Miss Andre.
Just let her talk, Stevens. Perhaps it may prejudice the jury in my favor.
Silence. The objection's overruled.
Mr. Stevens has my sympathies. His client is not the easiest to handle. Now, Miss Svensson, did you ever witness Mr. Faulkner's attitude towards his marriage?
He happy for first time in life. Happy like a decent man, what found right road.
Do you know of anything that made him worry in those days? Anything that could bring him to suicide eventually?
Oh, no, nothing.
Did you ever observe Miss Andre's attitude towards Mr. Faulkner's marriage?
She's silent. Silent like stone.
Mrs. Faulkner!
I understand you wanted to call me as a witness, Miss Flynn.
I did, Mrs. Faulkner, but I thought that you were in California.
I escaped.
Escaped?
Father was concerned over my health. He wouldn't allow me to come back, but I want to do my duty toward the memory of my husband. I'm at your disposal, Miss Flynn.
I can only express my deepest appreciation, Mrs. Faulkner. If you'll please have a seat, we'll be with you shortly.
Thank you.
Now, Miss Svensson, you are about to tell us about Miss Andre's attitude towards Mr. Faulkner's marriage.
I said she keeps silent, but I hear her crying and sobbing one night after Herr Faulkner's wedding. And that for the first and only time in her life.
Crying, you say? Did she seem to suffer much?
Suffer? No. Not her. One man, more or less, make no much difference to her. Well, I saw her unfaithful to Herr Born the night of his wedding.
Unfaithful? With whom?
I don't know, man. I saw him for the first time the night of the wedding.
Please tell us about it.
Oh, I go to wedding. It was so beautiful. The young bride, all white and lovely as lily, and my hair worn, poor hair worn, so handsome. I cried like looking at my own children. But she not go to wedding.
Did Miss Andre stay home?
She stayed home. I come back early. I come in servant's door. She not hear me come. She was home, but she was not alone.
And who was with her?
He was the man out in the garden on the roof. It was dark, but I could see. He holding in his arms. I think he wanted to crush her bones. And then he bent her back so far, I think she's gonna fall in the pool. And then he kissed her. I think he's never gonna take his lips off of hers.
And then what happened?
She stepped aside. She says something. I cannot hear. She speaks very soft. He just stepped aside and took her hand and kissed it and then held it on his lips so long. I get bored. I went back to my room.
Did you learn the name of that man?
No.
And did you ever see him again?
Yes, once.
And when was that?
The night of January 16th.
Please tell us about it, Miss Svensson.
Well, she was very strange that day. She called me and told me I have rest of day off. And I said I was very suspicious.
Why would that make you suspicious?
Well, my day off is Thursday, and I not asked for second day. So I say I not need day off. But she says she not need me, so I go.
What time did you go?
About 4 o'clock, but I went to no secret, so I came back.
And when did you come back?
About 10 at night. The house dark, no one home. So I wait. About a half hour after, I hear them come. Herr Faulkner's with her, so I afraid to stay. But before I go, I seen 2 gentlemen with her. One man, he drunk. I not know him.
Did you know the other?
The other man, he's about medium height with long wavy hair and light eyes. He was the man I seen kissing Miss Andre.
That is all, Miss Svensson.
Oh, just a minute, Miss Svensson. Lisa, have a little talk with me.
Why, I tell you all I know.
Well, you may know the answers to a few more questions. Now, you said you saw that stranger kissing Miss Andre.
Yes, I did.
And you said it was dark that night when you saw him for the first time.
Yes, it was dark.
And on the night of January 16th, when you were so ingenuously spying on your mistress, you said you saw her come in with Mr. Faulkner, and you hurried to depart in order not to be caught. Am I correct?
You have a good memory.
You just had a swift glance at the 2 gentlemen with them.
Yes.
Miss Svensson, can you tell us what the drunken gentleman looked like?
How can I? No time to notice face, and too dark at door.
So, it was too dark, and you were in a hurry, and yet you were able to identify a man you'd seen but once before.
Let me tell you something, mister. I am a religious woman. I am under oath, as you say. I respect oath. I said it was the same man, and I say it again.
That's all?
You're dismissed.
The people call Nancy Lee Faulkner.
Nancy Lee Faulkner. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
Nancy Lee Faulkner.
And how were you related to the late Bjorn Faulkner?
I was his wife.
Now, Mrs. Faulkner, I understand how painful this might be for you, and I appreciate your courage. But I will have to ask some questions that awaken sad memories.
I am ready, Miss Swift.
When did you meet Bjorn Faulkner?
In August of last year.
And where did you meet him?
At a ball given by my friend Sandra Van Renslik.
Will you kindly tell us about it, Mrs. Faulkner?
Sandra introduced us. I remember she said, "Here's a tough one for you, Nancy. I wonder whether you allowed this scalp to your well-known collection." Sandra had always insisted on exaggerating my popularity. I danced with him that night. We danced in the garden, under the trees. We stopped at the edge of a pool. We were alone in the darkness with the faint sound of the Blue Danube waltz filling the silence. Mr. Faulkner reached up to pick a rose for me, and as he tore it off, his hand brushed my bare shoulder. I don't know why, but I blushed. He noticed and apologized, smiling graciously. Then he took me back to the guests. I think we both felt a silent understanding that night, for we did not dance again with each other.
And when did you see each other again?
3 days later, I invited him to dine at my home in West Palm, just an informal little dinner with father as my chaperone. It was a real Swedish meal, and I cooked it myself.
Did you see him often after this?
Yes, quite often. His visits became more and more frequent until the day.
Until the day?
The day he proposed to me.
Please tell us about it, Mrs. Faulkner.
Mr. Faulkner and I went driving alone. It was a beautiful day with a bright, cold sunshine. I was driving my car and I felt so young, so happy that I grew reckless. I'm sorry, it's a little hard for me to think of those days. I was reckless enough to lose my way. We stopped on a strange country road. I laughed and said, "We're lost. I've kidnapped you and I won't release you." He answered, "The ransom you want is not in circulation." Then, suddenly, he seized my hand and looking straight at me said, "What's the use of pretending? I love you, Nancy."
Oh, Mrs. Faulkner, I'm so sorry. If you wish to be dismissed now, we can continue later.
Thank you, I'm all right. I can go on. It was then that I learned the desperate state of Mr. Faulkner's fortune. He said that he had to tell me the truth, that he could not ask me to marry him when he had nothing to offer me, but I loved him. So I told him that money had never meant anything to me.
Did Mr. Faulkner feel hopeless about the future when your engagement was announced?
No, not at all. He said that my faith in him and my courage had helped him so much. I told him it was our duty to save his enterprises, our duty to the world he had wronged, not to ourselves. I made him realize his past mistakes. He was ready to atone for them. We were entering a new life together, a life of unselfish devotion to the service and welfare of others.
Did you remain in Florida after your wedding?
Yes. We made our home in my West Palm residence. Mr. Faulkner gave up his penthouse.
Did Mr. Faulkner ever tell you about his relations with Miss Andre?
No, not then. But he did. 2 weeks after our wedding, he came to me and said, "Dearest, there is a woman. There was a woman. And I feel I must tell you about her." I said, "I know it. You don't have to say another word if you'd rather not, dear."
And what did he tell you?
He said, "Karen Andre is the cause and symbol of my darkest years. I am going to dismiss her."
And what did you answer?
I told him that I understood him, that he was right, but, I said, "We must not be cruel. Perhaps you can find another position for Miss Andre." He said that he would provide for her financially, but that he never wanted to see her again.
He therefore dismissed Miss Andre voluntarily, of his own choice.
Miss Flint, there are two kinds of women in this world, and my kind is never jealous of the other.
Of course. Mrs. Faulkner, can you tell us the state of Mr. Faulkner's business at the time of your marriage?
I'm afraid I don't understand much about business, but I know that father made a loan, a very large loan, to my husband.
Now, Mrs. Faulkner, can you tell us whether you believe it at all possible that your husband committed suicide?
I think it totally impossible.
Did he ever make plans for the future?
We used to dream of the future together, even on the evening before his death. We were sitting by the fire together in his study, talking about the years ahead. We knew we would not be wealthy for a long time. We were planning to have a modest little home with a bright kitchen, a little flower garden. We'd be so happy there, just two of us, until we had little ones to take care of.
And this was on January 15th, the day before his death.
Yes.
Can you tell us what Mr. Faulkner did on the day of January 16th?
He spent it in town on business, as usual. He came home late in the afternoon and said that he had a business banquet to attend, so he did not have dinner at home. He left at about 6 o'clock.
What was this business banquet he had to attend?
He did not tell me, and I did not ask. I make it a point to never interfere with his business.
Well, did you notice anything peculiar when he said goodbye to you that night?
No, not a thing. He kissed me and said that he would try to come home early. I stood at the door and watched as he drove away. He waved as his car disappeared in the dusk. I stood there for a few minutes, thinking of how happy we were, of what a perfect dream our love had been, like a delicate idol. I did not know that our perfect romance would indirectly, through jealousy, bring about his death.
Your Honor, we object. Move that be stricken out, please.
Witness's last sentence will go out.
Thank you, Mrs. Faulkner, that is all.
Will you be able to answer a few questions now, Mrs. Faulkner?
As many as you wish, Mr. Stevens.
You said that your romance was like a perfect dream, didn't you?
Yes.
A sacred troth that regenerated a soul?
Yes.
a beautiful, uplifting relationship based on mutual trust.
Yes.
Then why did you hire a detective to spy on your husband?
I didn't hire a detective to spy on my husband. I hired him to protect Mr. Faulkner.
Will you kindly explain that?
Well, you see, some time ago, Mr. Faulkner had been threatened by a gangster, Guts Reagan, I believe they call him. Mr. Faulkner paid no mind to it. No one could intimidate him. He refused to hire a bodyguard, but I was worried, so as soon as we were married, I hired Mr. Van Fleet to watch over Mr. Faulkner.
How can a sleuth following at a distance protect Mr. Faulkner?
Well, I heard that the underworld has a way of figuring out those things. I thought they would not attack a man who was constantly watched.
So all Mr. Van Fleet had to do was to watch Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner alone?
Yes.
Not Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre?
Mr. Stevens, that supposition is insulting to me.
I haven't noticed you sparing insults, Mrs. Faulkner.
Well, I assure you that wasn't my intention.
Now, you said that Mr. Faulkner told you he never wanted to see Miss Andre again.
Yes, he did.
And yet, he called on her after his marriage. He called on her often, and at night. Your detective told you that, didn't he?
Yes, I knew it.
How do you explain it?
I cannot explain it. How can I know what blackmail she was holding over his head?
How do you explain the fact that your husband lied to you about the business banquet on the night of January 16th and went directly to Miss Andre's house?
If I could explain that, Mr. Stevens, I might be able to save us the bother of this whole trial. We would have an explanation of my husband's mysterious death. All I know is that she made him come to her house for some reason which he could not tell me, and that he was found dead that night.
Mrs. Faulkner, I just want you to answer one more question.
Yes.
I want you to state here, under oath, that Bjorn Faulkner loved you.
Bjorn Faulkner was mine.
That's all. Thank you, Mrs.
That's not all.
Of course not.
Ask her one more question, Stevens.
What is it, Miss Andre?
Ask her whether or not she loved him.
I did, Miss Andre.
And how can you speak of it as you did, you
Sit
freaking
down.
lie? How can you speak
Miss
of it?
Andre!
Miss
Sit down! Miss Faulkner, you're dismissed.
One of us is lying and we
Stop
both know
this.
which one!
You'll refrain from further interruptions, Miss Andre.
Get to this.
If Your Honor, please, the prosecution has one more witness to introduce.
Very well.
Mr. John Graham Whitfield.
John Graham Whitfield. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
John Graham Whitfield.
And your occupation?
I'm president of the Whitfield National Bank.
And how were you related to the late Bjorn Faulkner?
I was his father-in-law.
Now, Mr. Whitfield, it is obvious that you are well qualified to pass judgment on financial matters. Can you tell us the state of Mr. Faulkner's business at the time preceding his death?
It was desperate but not hopeless. My bank had made a large loan of $25 million to Mr. Faulkner in an effort to save his enterprises. Needless to say, that money's lost.
What prompted you to make such a loan?
He was the husband of my only daughter, and her happiness has always been paramount to me. But my motives weren't entirely personal. Realizing the countless tragedies of thousands of investors, I considered it my duty to take every effort possible to prevent it.
Is it possible that you would have risked such a considerable sum in Mr. Faulkner's enterprises if you believed them hopelessly destined to crash?
Certainly not. I knew that it would be a difficult undertaking, but was confident that my business acumen would prevent the crash had Faulkner lived.
Therefore, he had no reason to commit suicide as far as business matters were concerned.
He had every reason for remaining alive.
Mr. Faulkner, Mr. Whitfield, can you tell us if Mr. Faulkner was happy in his personal life and his relations with your daughter?
Miss Flint, may I remind you that I consider the home and the family as the most important institutions in our lives. Therefore, you'll believe me when I tell you that my daughter's family's happiness was of utmost importance to me, and she had found perfect happiness with Bjorn Faulkner.
Now, can you tell us your personal opinion of Mr. Faulkner?
It's safe to say he had a lot of qualities that I did not approve of. We were as different as two human beings could be. I considered duty above all. Faulkner considered nothing but his own pleasure.
Mr. Whitfield, from your knowledge of him, can you tell us whether you believe it at all possible that Bjorn Faulkner committed suicide?
I consider it absolutely impossible.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, that is all.
Mr. Whitfield, were you very fond of your son-in-law?
Yes.
And you never disagreed with him? You never lost your temper in a quarrel?
Mr. Stevens, I never lose my temper.
Well, if my memory serves me right, there was some kind of trouble at the time that you made that stupendous loan to Mr. Faulkner. Wasn't there something said to the effect that you denied making him the loan?
Purely a misunderstanding, I assure you. Mr. Faulkner made a somewhat unethical attempt to hasten that loan, which was completely unnecessary because I would have granted it for my daughter's sake.
You said that your fortune had been badly damaged by the Faulkner crash?
Yes.
And your financial situation is rather strained at the moment?
Yes.
Then how could you afford to offer a $50,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of Guts Reagan?
Objection, what does that have to do with the case?
Objections.
Your Honor, I'd like the privilege of answering this.
Very well.
I did offer such a reward out of a feeling of civic duty. The gentleman commonly called Guts Reagan is a notorious criminal. I offered the reward as evidence for his arrest and conviction, and I agree with Miss Flint. What does this have to do with the present case?
Oh, tell me this, Mr. Whitfield. Why did you leave for California in such a hurry before the beginning of this trial?
Well, it's simple. It was for my daughter's sake. She was crushed by the tragedy, and I hastened to take her away to save her health and perhaps her life.
You love your daughter profoundly?
Yes.
You've always made it a point that her every wish should be granted?
Yes, I can proudly say yes.
And when she, or you, desire anything, you don't stop at the price, do you?
We don't have to.
Then would you refuse to buy her the man she wanted?
Oh, Mr.
You wouldn't
Stevens.
stop it if it took your entire fortune to break the first unbreakable man that you'd ever met.
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained, Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Whitfield, are you going to tell us that your money had nothing to do with Mr. Faulkner dismissing Miss Andre, that no ultimatum was delivered to him?
Your insinuations are mistaken, Mr. Stevens. My daughter was no more jealous of Miss Andre than she would have been of his dirty underwear.
I'd be careful of such statements as those, Mr. Whitfield. Remember that your daughter paid for what Karen Andre got for free.
Your Honor!
Why, you goddamn impudent! Do you know who I am? Do you know I have crushed Mr. Whitfield better than you?
Whitfield, sit down!
That's just what I wanted to prove. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield.
Mr. Whitfield, you're dismissed.
The people rest.
Move that the case be dismissed for lack of evidence.
Denied.
Exception.
Noted.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we cannot pass judgment on Karen Andre without passing it on Bjorn Faulkner. He had put himself beyond all present standards. Whether it was below or above them, that's a question for each of us to decide personally. But I'll ask you to remember that he was the man who said he needed no justifications for his actions. He was the justification. The man who said that laws were made for the fun of breaking them. If you'll remember that, then you will understand that the life into which he was thrown in his last few months was as impossible as a tiger in a vegetarian cafeteria. And to escape it, he would be driven to the most desperate means, including suicide. Our first witness will be James Chandler.
James Chandler. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
James Chandler.
What is your occupation?
I'm the handwriting expert for the police department.
Do you recognize this letter?
I do. It was a letter found in Mr. Faulkner's apartment on the night of his death. I've been called upon to examine it.
And what were you asked to determine?
I was asked to determine whether or not it was written by Bjorn Faulkner.
And what is your verdict?
This letter was written by Mr. Bjorn Faulkner.
Your witness. Thank you.
Mr. Chandler, it was brought to your attention during inquest that Miss Andre was in the habit of signing Mr. Faulkner's signature to unimportant documents at the time she was employed as his secretary. Have you had a chance to compare those signatures with Faulkner's real ones?
I have.
And what was your opinion of them?
I can compliment Miss Andre on her art. The difference is very slight.
From her knowledge of him, would you say it at all possible that she could have forged this letter so perfectly as to escape detection?
It is possible, but not probable.
Thank you, that is all.
Mr. Chandler, you're dismissed.
Defense calls Sigrid Youngquist.
Sigrid Youngquist. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
Sigrid Youngquist,
What is your position?
secretary to Herr Bjorn Faulkner.
How long did you hold that position?
Since beginning of November, since Miss Andre left.
What was your position before that?
Bookkeeper for Herr Bjorn Faulkner.
And how long did you hold that job?
8 years.
Did Mr. Faulkner give you Miss Andre's position after she was dismissed?
Yes.
Did Miss Andre instruct you in your new duties?
Yes, she did.
What was her behavior like at the time? Did she seem angry, sorry, or resentful?
No, she was very calm and explained everything clearly, like always.
Have you ever noticed any trouble between Miss Andre and Mr. Faulkner?
Herr lawyer, there can be no more trouble between Herr Faulkner and Miss Andre than between you and your face in the mirror.
I see. Have you ever witnessed any business conferences between Mr. Faulkner and Mr. Whitfield?
I never been present at conferences, but I seen Herr Whitfield come to our office many times. Herr Whitfield, he not like Herr Faulkner.
And what makes you think that?
I heard what he said one day. Herr Faulkner was desperate for money, and Herr Whitfield asked him what he was going to do if his business crashed. Herr Faulkner shrugged and said lightly, "Oh, commit suicide." Herr Whitfield looked at him very strangely and coldly and said very slowly, "If you do, be sure you make a good job of it."
Excuse me. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
What's going on?
There was a phone call, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. Your Honor, if you please, I'd like to report this incident as a hoax, and I would like to determine its purpose. A man has just called and insisted on speaking to me immediately. When informed that was impossible, he gave the following message just brought to me. Do not put Karen Andre on the stand until I get there. No signature.
I want people on the stand
Sit
right
down,
away.
Miss Andre, sit down.
Miss Andre, can you question me now?
Miss Andre, I'm afraid that's impossible. I have to finish the examination with Miss Youngquist first.
Then hurry.
Please.
Sit down, Miss Andre. Continue, Mr. Stevens.
Miss Youngquist, where were you on the night of January 16th?
I was in our office in the Faulkner building working. I've been working late for many nights.
And what did you do when you heard Mr. Faulkner's death?
I want to call Herr Whitfield. I phoned his home, but butler say he not there. I call his office, no answer. I call many places, but not find Herr Whitfield. In the end, I call his home again, and I have to tell Miss Faulkner that Herr Faulkner committed suicide.
And when you told her that, what were Mrs. Faulkner's first words?
She said, "Dear God, don't give it to the newspapers."
That's all. Thank you, Miss Youngquist.
Just one moment, Miss Andre. Why such a hurry? Who are you expecting? Miss Youngquist, you've been employed by Mr. Faulkner for over 8 years, haven't you?
Yes.
And did you know all the time how crooked and criminal your boss's operations were?
No, I did not.
And do you know now that he is a crook and a swindler?
No, I do not know that.
You don't, and you never wondered what all those brilliant financial operations of his were.
I know that Herr Faulkner allowed to do things that normal people not allowed to do, but I never wonder and I never doubt. I know it was not wrong.
And how did you know that?
Because he was Herr Bjorn Faulkner.
And he could do no wrong?
When little people like you and me meet a man like Bjorn Faulkner, we take our hats off and we bow, and sometimes we take orders, but we don't ask questions.
Splendid, my dear Youngquist. Your devotion to your master is worthy of admiration. You would do anything for him, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Were you very devoted to Miss Andre, too?
Miss Andre was dear to Herr Faulkner.
Then such a little matter as a few lies for your master's sake would mean nothing.
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained.
I haven't lied, lawyer. Bjorn Faulkner is dead and cannot tell me to lie. But if I had the choice, I would lie for Bjorn Faulkner rather than tell the truth for you.
For which statement I am more grateful for than you can imagine, Miss Youngquist. That is all.
Miss Youngquist, you're dismissed.
Defense calls Karen Andre.
Karen Andre. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
That's useless. I'm an atheist.
Miss Andre, the witness must affirm regardless.
I affirm.
What is your name?
Karen Andre,
What was your last position?
secretary to Bjorn Faulkner
How long did you hold that position?
for 10 years.
Tell us about your first meeting with Bjorn Faulkner.
I answered his advertisement for a stenographer. I met him for the first time in his office on an obscure side street of Stockholm. He was alone. It was my first job. It was his first office.
How did Mr. Faulkner first meet you?
He got up and didn't say a word. He just stood and looked at me. His mouth was insulting even when silent. You couldn't stand his gaze for very long. I didn't know whether I wanted to kneel or slap his face. But I didn't do either. I told him what I'd come for.
Did he hire you then?
He told me I was too young and that he didn't like me, but he threw a stenographer's pad at me and told me to get to work, for he was in a hurry, so I did.
And you worked all day?
All day. He dictated fast, almost faster than he could talk. He didn't give me time to say a word, and he never took his eyes off of me.
When did he first...
When did he first take me? That first day I met him.
And how did that happen?
He seemed to take a delight in giving me orders. He acted as if he were cracking a whip over an animal he wanted to break. And I was afraid.
Because you didn't like that?
Oh, because I liked it. After I finished my first 8 hours, I told him I was quitting. He looked at me and didn't answer. Then he asked me suddenly if I'd ever belonged to a man. I said no, because I hadn't. Then he said he'd give me $1,000 if I'd go into the inner office and take my skirt off. I said I wouldn't. He said if I didn't, he'd take me. I said try it. And he did. After a while, I picked up my clothes, but I didn't go. I stayed. I kept the job.
And you worked and lived and rose to success together ever since?
We were together for 10 years. When we made our first million, he took me to Vienna. We sat in a restaurant where the orchestra played Sing Gypsy. When we made 10 million, he took me to Delhi. We sat on the shore of the Ganges on the steps of an old temple where human slaves had been sacrificed to the gods. When we made 25 million, he took me to New York. We hired a pilot to fly a plane over the city. The wind waved Bjorn's hair as a banner over the rest of the world at his feet.
Miss Andre, can you tell us the extent of Mr. Faulkner's personal fortune at the height of his success?
No, and he couldn't tell you himself. He had no personal fortune. He took what he wanted. When we owed money to one of his companies, it was crossed off the books and debited to accounts over several other concerns. It was very simple. We prepared all the balance sheets ourselves.
Then why did a man of Mr. Faulkner's genius resort to such methods, Miss Andre?
He wanted to build a gigantic net, and to build it fast, a net over the world, held in his own hand. He had to draw unlimited sums of money. He had to establish his credit. So we paid dividends out of his capital. Dividends much higher than we'd actually earned.
And when did Mr. Faulkner's business difficulties start?
A year ago.
And what brought Mr. Faulkner to America this time?
A short-term loan of $10 million from the Whitfield National Bank was due, and we could not meet it. We had to have an extension. Mr. Whitfield refused it until his daughter came into the question.
And how did that happen?
Bjorn met her at a party. She made it obvious she was greatly interested in him. Then one day he came to me and said, Karen, we have only one piece of collateral left, and you're holding it. You'll have to let me borrow it for a while. I said, certainly. What is it? He said it was himself. I asked Nancy Whitfield, and he nodded. I didn't answer at once. It wasn't very easy to say. Then I said, all right, Bjorn. He asked, will that change things between us? I said no.
Well, tell us, had Mr. Faulkner proposed to Miss Whitfield?
No, she proposed to him.
And how did that happen?
He told me about it. She took him for a drive and stopped on a lonely road. She said that they were lost, that she had kidnapped him and wouldn't release him. He said the ransom she wanted was not in circulation, but she said, what's the use of pretending? I want you and you know it. You don't want me and I know that, but I pay for what I want and I have the price. He asked, and what's the price? She said the extension of a certain $10 million loan, which you'll need in order to save your business. If you're to stay out of jail as a swindler, it can only be in the custody of a Mrs. Bjorn Faulkner.
That's a lie. That's a shameless lie.
Quiet. Anyone disturbing these proceedings will be asked to leave.
Miss Andre, what was Mr. Faulkner's answer to that?
He said it'll cost you an awful lot of money, but she said money has never meant anything to me. Then he said, will you always remember that it's a business deal? You're not buying any feeling and you're not to expect any. But she said, I don't need any. You'll have your money and I'll have you. Such was the bargain.
Bargain. Was Mr. Whitfield eager to accept that bargain?
Bjorn thought Whitfield would have a stroke when his daughter's decision was announced to him. But Miss Whitfield insisted, and she always had her way. It was agreed that the loan would be extended and that Whitfield would give Bjorn unlimited credit.
In other words, Mr. Faulkner sold himself as his last security.
Yes, and like the others, it meant nothing to him.
Miss Andre, did you resent that marriage?
No. We had always faced our business as a war. We looked at this as our hardest campaign.
Why did Mr. Faulkner dismiss you 2 weeks after the wedding?
He was forced to do that. Whitfield refused to advance the money he had promised.
And what reason did Whitfield offer for that refusal?
The reason that Bjorn was keeping a mistress. It was Miss Whitfield's ultimatum. I had to be dismissed.
And did Mr. Whitfield grant the loan?
No, he didn't grant it. He attached what he called a slight condition to it.
What was that condition?
He wanted controlling interest in Bjorn's enterprises.
And did Faulkner agree to that?
Bjorn said he'd rather gather all of his stock certificates into one pile and strike a match.
And did Mr. Whitfield grant the loan?
No, he didn't grant it. So Bjorn took it.
How did he do that?
By forging Mr. Whitfield's signature on $25 million worth of securities.
And how do you know that?
Because I helped him do it.
Did this help Mr. Faulkner?
Only temporarily. Certain dividend payments were coming due, and we could not meet them. Bjorn had stretched his credit to the utmost, and there was no more to be had.
How did Mr. Faulkner take the situation, Miss Andre?
He knew it was the end.
What was his plan?
You don't find men like Bjorn Faulkner cringing before a bankruptcy commission. You don't find them locked in jail.
And the alternative?
He was not afraid of the world. He had defied its every law. He was going to do this when and how he pleased. He was the bravest man I've ever known.
I told you to wait for me!
Larry?
Arrest that man!
You don't understand!
This man should not be here! Should
Arrest him!
That's my baby!
Maybe that's why Miss Andre.
Don't say a word!
This
Don't
man
say a
loves
word!
me! He'll lie! He'll do anything to save me!
Silence!
What he said!
Silence!
Bjorn is dead!
Bjorn's dead?
Didn't you know, Miss Andre?
Bjorn's dead?
Pick her up!
This is ridiculous.
Miss Andre,
Karen!
Your Honor, we're going to need a 15-minute recess.
15-minute recess granted. No one leaves.
Karen, come here. Drink some water.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a 15-minute intermission. We'll be right back.
They forgot what? Oh, like I had this tickle, but I'm like right there. Yeah, right? It's like, there's I would help you, but I can look at my phone. Think so far. So far, I'm not sure which one. Which one?
In real life, I do, but I never get
So for you guys would have gotten chosen. Yeah, I wondered.
Got picked.
Yeah. Yeah. It picks me. I was saying, you need to pull a Wayne's World, and after they choose, you go, and show us the other ending. So we get to see both. And then you said Clue. You could take that approach too. Yeah, there you go. Or
This is what really happened.
can you run back real quick and tell Josh? She was where I always run into outfit snags. Oh wait.
Yeah, this works.
You don't buy it.
I know. Exactly. It's like I brought flip flops and other flip flops.
The actual statement here, just so I have a little more room to be able to stretch, because that's the thing that's as well right there.
Yeah. These come high. We had a little black box together that most of the work I did was in the smaller theater. And I like the size. It's nice for as an actor or a director to work with faces that can be seen and do sound equipment.
We had both. The Fine Arts Center it had been built in 1970, but it was state of the art at the building. So our main theater set 1400s. That's true. Which it actually was the place where touring companies would come through. So we actually got that experience too. So like my first freshman year, I got to work with the people from Big River tour, load in, load out, and then they were like, "Can you help me?"
Oh, cute. I was thinking that about yours. That's funny.
They like, "Can you help? With merch?" And I'm like, "I the show, I'd actually bought a ticket." How we'd been and actually, the people in the company were like, "You know what? Just as soon as it's over, come back out, help, for handing the stuff out people are buying, and then help with the level. I'm sure about there." And I actually got a sweatshirt. They actually like here along with this way. The vocal selections book.
Our big thing was the Shakespeare Festival, so we had like a globe replica and a full-size, really nice big theater that we performed like the quarterly shows. We had 4 a year that weren't there, and then the rest were like small scale. We didn't ever get to use the globe, the Shakespeare Festival in November, and they had like a Shakespeare period piece in the globe, and then a modern play going in other theaters. So we did some really interesting stuff that I never really seen otherwise. Big professional, and they just ran the actors for this summer to come up with the apartments, and so the city would like double in size in the summer when the festival was open. So
Spring Greens was American Players Theater. It's the outdoor theater in the woods, a smaller one. Actually, it's right near Taliesin, which was Frank Lloyd Wright's plays and stuff. But going over to high school, we went to see Hamlet, and the actor playing was Randall Kim. And like our teacher was like, "No, watch, he can like sweat on cue, basically." And we were in front row, and I'm like, "God, they did it." The actor, remember Second Matrix movie? The key guy. The old Asian gentleman? That was this guy. I actually have a friend who did something at Stanford and stuff. I went to school with martial arts. He's actually been in a number of. He's just in Gerard. The movie Gerard Butler Plane movie was just that. He's in there.
that's really cool. Yeah, we had a good little group. A lot of people stayed local, and a lot of people went to California.
Right.
And we have friends that have done lots of great travels to see them. But a couple were I choose one in Chicago, one in Pennsylvania and Shakespeare. Did those plays pretty there. It's fun to see the ones that you saw them come living in it, to see them actually able to stay in the good work.
Right.
It's impressive. That's not easy to do. Got tradition. Very like my problem.
Somebody with Mega Cuz, I can't remember which of the actors, for somebody with, how do we, what advice do you have for somebody who's gonna go, well, have an agent, like, what do you plan to do? Have you done an agent? No, I'm just gonna go out to LA. He's like, first thing, no. New York. Because everybody in LA, where stuff really looks on TV, New York. You walk there, Law and Order, SVU, all these people, it's theater people that are doing all that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And get yourself an agent. Yeah.
Figure out what it is.
The regular fans.
Bravo, bravo.
Yeah, it was funny. Like as soon as you walked back through the curtains, it was like,
So it's funny,
no,
that's the first thing you said when you walked out.
No,
I bought some in they're a like a tan and white checker, like, and it's the same style. And I was like, oh my god, these are so comfortable. And I was wearing them a bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't have a pair of plain black shoes. I can run in these things, like I can, yeah, I can like Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got them in a whole bunch of different colors.
I'm doing physical therapy.
Some nice shoes that may consider. I got some Skechers.
I think these are 7.5.
No, right. I have a knee brace somewhere, so I know what's put a knee brace. I should have done that today.
Super comfy.
I don't have a lot of occasions.
Because of the weight, the calves and stuff.
Oh, I've decided I'm gonna find occasions. I've been wearing heels a lot lately.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So much, just because they'll get caught up on my leg, trying to get them on. And then,
Yeah, you said you had a part in this, and I was like,
Yeah, that was it. I'm unlisted, uncredited.
she's not into pictures of the cast. Yeah, he's watching. Hey, good.
And yeah, I had a knee brace. Yeah, when I was training for marathons with Jeff, I had knee problems. Oh, cool.
Six left.
Impressions at all.
I usually go and do the 5 call.
The one, the actor that you guys were saying you've seen in several other ones, did they end up showing up?
There have been a lot of repeat.
no, it was, and I commented on the fact that this was the first one that I've been to that he was again.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The short, dark kid, skinny. He was really intense. Really intense with this.
He went outside. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got there. That's
Yes,
his brother.
there we go.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Got there, yes. There's the name.
Yeah, we wanted him to be, but the auditions and stuff didn't, or rehearsals didn't work out for his work schedule.
Yeah. That's always a tricky bit.
Yeah.
Because you guys can't pay the actors, I assume. It's
Not yet. We want to work up to that, but we'll.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta start a reputation.
They're sponsors and
Oh, cool. Very cool. Very cool. Like, the one thing here is the handicap lift is in such an odd spot. Like, who planned that? I bet.
want it gone, but there's like nowhere backstage for it to be so that it can be like ADA compliant and stuff. So yeah, no, the second so when we started in
Why
this
did they
building,
need that to be compliant? Because you can get in the building.
because they needed to spend money on something.
Need to have access to all locations.
Yeah.
They were using the stage before we got here. They were using the stage as a storage unit. We had to come in here and clean it all out and like fix everything up and stuff. Like we changed all the plugs on stage. And we added a lot of lighting in there. And like all kinds of stuff.
It's nice that it's at least like in an elevated stage presentation.
Yeah, curtains are the cities and stuff. They come down. We'll strike tomorrow.
Because that can get spendy. All this kind of
yeah,
stuff.
we use the curtains.
That's very nice.
Because we do so much work.
Yeah, you're good. If you like. It's probably pretty close to that. Maybe I'll have
Or they use it for the actor?
No, all the actors seem to have this room set up.
You want this?
So I can look at it.
Yeah, no, this is fine. I sit back there and do my thing.
Megan?
Court attention. All rise. Superior Court number 11 of the state of Florida, the Honorable Judge Heath presiding.
You may be seated. State of Florida versus Karen Andre resuming.
Your Honor, may we approach the bench?
Granted.
I would just like to inform you that I've issued a warrant for Gus Reagan's arrest, as he's obviously an accomplice in this murder. But he's disappeared. He was last seen
Hey,
at the
keep your
bench.
shirt on. Who's disappeared? What do you suppose I appeared for? Just to give you guys a thrill? You don't have to issue any warrants at this point. I'll stay right here. She's guilty. I'm guilty.
Very well.
Mr. Stevens, proceed.
Karen Andre. Miss Andre, when you took the stand earlier, did you know the whole truth about this case?
No.
Do you wish to retract any of your testimony?
No.
When you first took the stand, did you intend to shield anyone?
Yes.
Whom?
Bjorn Faulkner.
Do you still find it necessary to shield him?
No. It's not necessary anymore.
Do you still claim that Bjorn Faulkner committed suicide?
No. Bjorn Faulkner did not commit suicide. He was murdered. But I didn't kill him. You have to believe me. Not for my sake. I don't really care what you do to me now, but because you cannot let his murder remain unpunished. I'll tell you the whole truth. I've lied at the inquest. I've lied to my own attorney. I was going to lie here, but everything I told you so far has been true. I'll tell you the rest.
You had started telling us about Bjorn Faulkner's way out of his difficulties, Miss Andre.
I told you that he was going to leave the world, but he was not to kill himself. And suicide was staged. I did throw a man's body off the penthouse, but that body was dead before I threw it. It was not Bjorn Faulkner.
Please explain this to us, Miss Andre.
Bjorn wanted to be officially dead. No searches or investigations were to bother him. He was to disappear. He had the plan in mind for a long time. We've kept $10 million of the Whitfield forgery for this. We just needed someone to help us. Someone who could not be connected with Bjorn in any way. There was only one such person, Reagan.
What made you believe that Reagan would be willing to help in so dangerous an undertaking?
Because he loved me.
And he agreed to help you in spite of that?
He agreed because of that.
What was the plan, Miss Andre?
Reagan was to get a corpse, but he wasn't to kill anyone for the purpose. We waited. That day, January 16th, Lefty O'Toole, a gunman, was killed by rival gangsters. His murderers have since been arrested and have confessed, so you can be sure that Reagan had nothing to do with the murders. But you may remember reading in the paper that O'Toole's body mysteriously disappeared from his mother's house. That was Reagan's work. O'Toole's height, measurements, and hair were the same as Bjorn's. He was the man I threw off of the penthouse.
Was that the extent of Reagan's help?
No. Reagan was to get a plane to take Bjorn to South America. Bjorn had never learned to operate a plane. Reagan used to be a transport pilot. But that day, January 16th, Bjorn transferred $10 million to 3 banks in Buenos Aires under the name Ragnar Hayden. A month later, I was supposed to meet him at the Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. Until then, the 3 of us were not to communicate with each other. No matter what happened, we were not to reveal the secret.
Tell us what happened on the night of January 16th, Miss Andre.
Bjorn came to my house that night. I'll never forget his smile when he stepped out of the elevator. He loved danger. We had dinner together. At 9:30, we went to Reagan's house. He had O'Toole's body dressed in traveling clothes. We drove back to my house. Bjorn wanted to be seen entering the building, so I didn't use my key. I rang the doorbell. We were dressed formally to make it look like a great party. Bjorn and Reagan supported the body as if he were a drunken friend. And then the night watchman opened the door, and we went up in the elevator.
And then what happened?
Bjorn exchanged clothes with the corpse. He wrote the letter. Then they carried the body out and left it leaning against the parapet. Then we said goodbye.
And then?
Bjorn was to go first. He went down in the elevator. I stood and watched the needle of the indicator moving down, 50 floors down. And then it stopped and he was gone.
And then?
Reagan followed him a few minutes later. They were to meet 10 miles out of the city where Reagan had left his plane. I stood alone for an hour, and I didn't want to wait out in the garden with the corpse, the dead man that was supposed to be Bjorn, so I laid on my bed in my bedroom. Took Bjorn's robe and I buried my face in it. I could almost feel the warmth of his body. There was a clock by my bed, and it ticked in the darkness, and I waited. When an hour had passed, I knew that the plane had taken off. So I got up, I tore my dress to make it look like a struggle. I went out to the garden, to the parapet. I looked down and there were so many lights. The world seemed so small. Then I threw the body over and I watched it fall. I thought all of Bjorn's troubles went with it. I didn't know that his life went too.
That's all, Miss Andre.
I must confess, Miss Andre, there's not much left for me to do here. You've done all my work yourself. Now tell us, Did Bjorn Faulkner have a clear conception of the difference of right and wrong?
Bjorn never thought of things as right or wrong. To him, it was only you can or you can't, and he always could.
And yourself, didn't you ever object to helping him in all those crimes?
To me, it was only he wants or he doesn't.
You said Bjorn Faulkner loved you?
Yes.
Did he ever ask you to marry him?
No, what for?
Don't you know that there are laws put into place for situations such as these?
Laws made by whom, Miss Flint, and for whom?
Miss Andre, did your attorney inform you that anything you say here can be used against you?
I am here to tell the truth.
That you loved Bjorn Faulkner?
Yes.
Such as he was?
Because he was such as he was.
Exactly, Miss Andre. Now what would you do if a woman were to take away from you the man you worship so insanely? If she were to appeal to his soul rather than his animal desires as you seem to have done so successfully? If she took the ruthless scoundrel that you love so much and turned her into her own ideal, upright version of a man, would you still love him?
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained.
No, it's all right. I want to answer. I want the district attorney to know that she is insulting Bjorn Faulkner's memory.
You do, but you had no problem insulting him while he was alive by having an affair with a gangster.
You dare!
Don't,
Mr.
Gary.
Reagan, please.
You're mistaken, Miss Flint. Reagan loved me. I didn't love him.
And he didn't demand his usual price?
He demanded nothing.
You were the only one who knew all the details of Faulkner's criminal activities, weren't you?
Yes.
You had enough information to put him away at any time.
I would never do that.
But you could, if you wanted to.
I suppose so.
Well, isn't that the explanation for Faulkner's visits to you after his marriage? He had reformed. He wanted to avoid a crash, but you held it over his head. You could ruin him and expose him before he had a chance to make good on his crimes. Wasn't it fear and not love that held him in your hands, Miss Andre?
Bjorn never knew the meaning of the word fear.
Who else knew about the transfer of the $10 million to Buenos Aires?
Only Bjorn, myself, and Reagan.
Reagan? Mr. Faulkner could have had a perfectly legitimate business reason for this transfer.
I don't know of any.
You mean you won't tell of any? Miss Andre, Bjorn Faulkner kept you in lavish luxury for 10 years. You enjoyed platinum gowns and other little things like that. You hated to change your mode of living. You hated to see him turn his fortune over to his investors, to see him poor, didn't you?
I was never to see him poor.
No, of course not, because you and your gangster lover were going to murder him and take the $10 million no one knew about.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You've heard it testified that Bjorn Faulkner had no reason to commit suicide. He had no further reason to escape the first happiness he had ever known, and you hated him for it, didn't you?
You don't understand Bjorn Faulkner.
Maybe I don't. Let's see if I understand you correctly. You were raped by a man on the first day you met him, yet went on to live with him for 10 years in a brazenly illicit relationship. You helped defraud thousands of investors world over. You cultivated a friendship with a notorious gangster. You helped in a $25 million forgery. And you told us all of this proudly, flaunting your defiance of all decency. And now you expect us not to believe you, capable of murder.
You're wrong, Miss Flint. I am capable of murder. For Bjorn Faulkner's sake.
That's all, Miss Andre.
Miss Andre, take your seat.
Lawrence Reagan.
Lawrence Reagan. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
Lawrence Reagan.
What is your occupation?
Unemployed.
How long have you known Karen Andre?
About 5 months.
Where did you meet her?
Met her at Faulkner's office. I had gone there to do some business with her. I gave up the business because I'm his secretary.
How did you happen to become friendly with Miss Andre?
Well, that first meeting wasn't exactly friendly. She wouldn't let me in to see Faulkner. She said I had enough money to buy orchids by the pound, and I had no business with her boss. I said I'd think it over, so I went. I thought it over, only I didn't think about the business. I thought about her. Next day, I sent her a pound of orchids. You ever see how many that takes? That's how it all started.
Did you know of Miss Andre's relations with Mr. Faulkner?
I knew it before I even met her, so what of it? I knew it was hopeless. Couldn't help it.
You never expected her to share your feeling?
No.
You never made any attempts to force it upon her?
You gotta know all that?
I'm afraid we do.
I kissed her. Once. By force. It was the night of Faulkner's wedding, and she was all alone, and she looked so unhappy, and I was crazy about her. I didn't want her to know, but she knew. She said I was useless. We never mentioned it since.
Mr. Reagan, when did Miss Andre first tell you of Faulkner's planned escape?
About 2 weeks before we pulled it.
Was Lefty O'Toole one of your men?
No.
Were you connected with his murderers in any way?
No.
You actually had no definite knowledge of his planned murder?
No, I just had a way of guessing.
Tell us what happened on the night of January 16th.
Well, it all happened as Miss Andre has told you, but she only knows half the story. I know the rest.
Tell us what happened after you left the penthouse.
Well, I left 10 minutes after Faulkner. He had gotten in my car, and I had one of my men leave a car there for me at the door. I stepped on it, full speed.
Where did you go?
10 miles out of the city, Meadow Lane. I left my plane there early in the evening. Faulkner was to get there first and wait for me.
What time did you get there?
It was about midnight. There was a bright moon out. I could see tire tracks in the mud where Faulkner's car had passed. Then I turned out into the lane and I thought I'd lost my mind. The plane was gone.
And what did you do?
I searched around the lane for about 2 hours. I found Faulkner's car where we had agreed to hide it. It was empty, lights off, key in the switch. And I saw more tire tracks in the mud where my plane had taken off, but Faulkner couldn't fly it himself.
Did you search for any clues to this mystery?
I searched like a blood owl.
Did you find anything?
I did. One thing. A car.
What kind of car?
It was hidden deep in the bushes on the other side of the lane. It was a big black sedan.
What did you do?
Well, I wanted to know whose car it was, so I busted in the window and settled in the back seat to wait.
How long did you have to wait?
The rest of the night.
And then?
Then the owner came back. I saw him coming. He had no hat on. His face looked kind of strange. His clothes were wrinkled and grease spotted.
What did you do?
Well, I pretended to be asleep in the back seat. He approached the car, opened the door, and that's when he saw me. And he gave it a yell as if he'd been struck in the heart. His nerves must have been jittery.
And then what did you do?
Well, I woke him with a start. Stretched, rubbed my eyes, and said, "Oh, it's you. Fancy such a meeting. I don't think you like that." He said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I said, "Guts Reagan's the name. You might have heard of it. I was in a little bit of trouble and needed a place to hide out for a while. Finding this car here was quite a convenience." And he said, "Well, that's too bad. I'm going to need you to get out. I'm in a hurry."
Did you get out?
No, I stretched and said, "What's the hurry?" He said, "None of your business." I explained. It's not for me, you see. Just so happens a certain journalist is a friend of mine. I'm sure he'd appreciate the story of a man of your prominence found wandering around the wilderness at the crack of dawn. Well, I'm sure he'd like the whole story.
What did the man say?
Nothing. Took out a checkbook and he looked at me. I looked at him and I shrugged. And then he said, "Would $5,000 be a suitable token of appreciation to keep your mouth shut?" I said it'll do. Lawrence Reagan's the name. Then he wrote out the check. In fact, here it is.
I offer this check in evidence.
This is nonsense. Who was the man?
Who was the man, Mr. Reagan?
Let the clerk read that check to you.
Kindly read the check.
Read the check, bailiff.
Stated January 17th, paid to the order of Lawrence Reagan, sum of $5,000, signed John Graham Whitfield.
Oh, this is outrageous!
I offer this check in evidence.
Objection?
Overruled. Admitted into evidence.
Mr. Reagan, what did you do after you received this check?
Well, I put it in my pocket and I thanked him. And then I drew my gun out and I stuck it in his gut and I said, "Cut it out, you lousy bastard. What'd you do with Faulkner?" He opened his mouth like a fish, choking, couldn't make a sound.
William, Your Honor, are you going to let this man sit here in public in my presence saying all of these things?
Mr. Whitfield, the witness is allowed to testify. If it's proved to be perjury, he will suffer the consequences. Proceed, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honor. What did he answer to that, Mr. Reagan?
Well, at first he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." But then I jammed my gut in harder and I said, "Look, I'm in on it, so are you. Cut it out. I got no time to waste. What'd you do with Faulkner?" He said, "If you kill me, you'll never find out."
Did you get any information out of him?
No. I don't want to kill him. Yet. He said, "If you expose me, you'll expose the fake suicide, and Faulkner will be found." I asked, "Is he still alive?" He said, "Go and ask him." I talked, I threatened, it was no use. I let him go. I always thought I could get him.
Then did you try to find Faulkner?
Oh, I didn't lose a second. I rushed home, changed my clothes, grabbed a sandwich and a plane, and headed straight to Buenos Aires. I searched, I advertised in the papers. No one came looking for Ragnar Heathen's millions.
Did you try to communicate this with Miss Andre?
No, we had promised to stay away from each other for a month. And she had just been arrested for Faulkner's murder. I laughed when I heard that one. I couldn't say anything, not to expose him if he was still alive. So I waited.
What were you waiting for?
February 16th. The Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. I set my teeth and waited every minute and every hour that day. He never came.
And then what did you do?
Well, then I knew he was dead. So I came back to Florida and I started a search for my plane. Found it yesterday.
Where did you find it?
It was an abandoned field out in Polk County. I recognized the plane by the engine number, but it had been landed and set fire to.
Was the plane empty?
No. I found the body of a man in it.
Could you identify him?
No one could. It was nothing but a burnt out skeleton. But the height was the same. It was Faulkner. So I examined the body, or what was left of it, and I found 2 bullet holes. One through the rib over the heart, the other straight through the right hand. He didn't die without putting up a fight. He must have been disarmed first, shot through the hand, then murdered, defenseless, straight through the heart.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Reagan.
Just what is your business, Mr. Reagan?
You'd like me to answer that, wouldn't you, Miss?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has a right not to answer that question.
Sustained.
What do you do when prospective clients refuse to pay your protection?
I'm legally allowed not to understand what you're talking about.
Very well. May I question you as to whether you read the newspapers?
You may.
Well?
Question me.
Do you read the newspapers, Mr. Reagan?
Occasionally.
Then did you read that when Mr. James Van Sutton Jr. refused to pay a certain gangster protection, his magnificent country home was destroyed in an explosion just after the guests left, barely missing a wholesale slaughter? What was that, Mr. Reagan, a coincidence?
A remarkable coincidence, Miss Flint. Right after the guests left.
And did you read that when Mr. Van Dorn refused to pay a
Your
certain
Honor, we
gangster-
object. These questions are irrelevant.
Objection sustained.
So you had no ill feeling towards Mr. Faulkner for the failure of your business with him?
Nope.
Now, that's I beg your pardon, Mr. Lawrence Reagan. What would you do if a man were to take the woman that you loved and rape her?
I'd cut his throat with a dull saw.
You would? Then why would you allow Faulkner to continue visiting Miss Andre after his marriage?
I had nothing to say about that.
No, you two didn't hold a blackmail plot over his head?
Your Honor.
Proof of that?
Her association with you is best proof.
Objection.
Sustained.
How did you kill Faulkner in the penthouse that night?
Objection.
Sustained, Miss
Where's
Flynn.
your accomplice, the man who played the drunk?
I can give you his exact address. Whitfield Family Memorial, Evergreen Cemetery, which is the swankiest place poor Lefty's ever been.
Let me get this clear. You're claiming that the body buried in Evergreen Cemetery is Lefty O'Toole, and the body you found in the plane is Bjorn Faulkner.
Yes.
And what's to say it isn't the other way around? Supposing you did steal the body, what's to say you didn't turn up with this fantastic thing yourself? That you didn't plant the plane and the body and come up with this wild story in a desperate attempt to save your mistress. You heard her tell us that you would do anything for her, that you would lie for her.
Your Honor.
I liked her.
Where's your real proof, Mr. Reagan?
Miss Flint, you're a district attorney. And well, you know what I am. A lot of dirty work to do in this world of ours, such as life, or most of it. But do you really think that we're both so low that if something passes us, to which one kneels and no longer have eyes to see it? I loved her. She loved Faulkner. That's our only proof.
That's all, Mr. Reagan.
Mr. Reagan, take your seat.
Defense calls John Graham Whitfield.
Mr. Whitfield, I'd like to remind you that you are still under oath.
Mr. Whitfield, welcome back. Where were you on the night of January 16th?
I believe I was in Miami on business.
Do you have any witnesses? Who can prove that?
Mr. Stevens, I'm not in the habit of providing witnesses or securing any alibis to track my whereabouts. I wouldn't be able to find them now.
Of course. Mr. Whitfield, how many cars do you own?
4.
What are they?
One of them is a black sedan, as I'm sure you're anxious to learn, but it's not the only black sedan in Florida.
No, it's not. Mr. Whitfield, you just returned from California by plane?
Yes.
You flew it yourself?
Yes.
You're a licensed pilot then?
I am.
Now, that story of Mr. Reagan's is nothing but a lie in your opinion, isn't it?
It is.
Then who wrote the $5,000 check?
I did.
Will you kindly explain it?
It's simple. We all know Mr. Reagan's profession. He threatened to kidnap my daughter. I preferred to pay him off rather than to take any chances with her life.
Your daughter and your fortune are your most cherished possessions, aren't they?
They are.
Then what will you do to the man that took your money and deserted your daughter for another woman? You hated Faulkner. You wanted to break
Your
him.
Honor, this is ridiculous.
You hated Faulkner. You wanted to break him. You suspected his intention of staging suicide. The words Miss Youngquist heard you say prove it, didn't you?
I suspected nothing of the sort.
And on January 16th, didn't you spend the day watching Mr. Faulkner?
Certainly not.
Weren't you trailing him in your black sedan? Didn't you follow him as soon as he left his penthouse that night?
Fantastic. How on earth could I have known that it was Faulkner? If it was even Faulkner leaving, Van Fleet the detective did it.
Oh, Van Fleet, the detective wasn't watching for a trick. He had no suspicion of the plot. You had.
Mr. Stevens, how on earth could I have had any knowledge of a plot for that night?
Didn't you have any particular information about Faulkner's activities at the time?
None.
You heard of nothing unusual that day?
Nothing of the kind.
For instance, you did not hear that he transferred $10 million to Buenos Aires?
No, not at all.
I killed him! I killed Bjorn Faulkner! God help me! I had that man to kill him! The whole truth, I didn't know, but I see it now. He killed Faulkner because he lied. He knew about the 10 million. I told him.
You told Whitfield about that transfer?
He asked me many times about the 10 million, where it was spent. I didn't know it was a secret. That day, I told him about Buenos Aires at noon, January 16th.
What kind of frame-up is this?
You told Whitfield at noon?
I did. God help me.
Were you alone with Mr. Whitfield when you told him this?
Yes.
Then it's your word against Mr. Whitfield's?
Yes.
Sit down, Miss Youngquist.
Mr. Whitfield, you're dismissed. Are there any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
The defense rests.
The defense may proceed with closing argument.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are here to decide the fate of a woman. But much more than one woman is here on trial. Before you pronounce your verdict on Karen Andre, please think of your verdict on Bjorn Faulkner. Do you believe that he was the kind of man who would bow, renounce, and repent? If you do, she's guilty. But if you believe that in this sad, half-hearted world of ours, a man can still be born with life singing in his veins, a scoundrel, a swindler, a criminal, call him anything, but still a conqueror. If you value a strength that is its own motor, an audacity that is its own law, a spirit that is its own vindication, if you are able to admire a man who, no matter what mistakes he may have made in form, had never betrayed his essence, his self-esteem, if deep in your hearts you have felt a longing for greatness and a sense of life beyond the lives around you, if you have known a hunger which gray timidity can't satisfy, you'll understand Bjorn Faulkner. If you do, you'll understand the woman who was his priestess. Who is on trial in this case? Karen Andre? No. No, it is you, ladies and gentlemen, who are here on trial. It is your own souls that will be brought to light when your decision is rendered. And that decision must be not guilty. That is all. Thank you.
The district attorney may now conclude the case.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for once, I agree with the defense counsel. Two different types of humanity are opposed in this case, and their fate will depend on which side you choose to believe. You are asked by the defense to take the side of a swindler, a harlot, and a gangster, against the side of a man who is the model of social respectability and a woman who is everything the pure ideal of womanhood has been for centuries. On one side, you see a life of service, duty, and unselfishness, and on the other, a steamroller of sensual indulgence and egotistic ambition. I do agree with the defense counsel that the verdict of this case shall be passed deep within your own souls. If you believe that man was put here on earth for reasons other than his own enjoyment, if you believe that love is not only in your bedroom, but in your kitchen, in your parlor, and in your nursery, if you believe that the cozy fireside of a home is still the highest a man can aspire to, then you will believe that simple virtue is more powerful than arrogance, and that a man like Bjorn Faulkner would be brought to bow before it. Let your verdict show that none shall raise his head too high in defiance of our common standards. And that verdict must be guilty. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jury heard a lot of testimony today. The bailiff is about to bring you into the jury room. I ask you to think of your verdict carefully. You are to determine whether Karen Andre is guilty or not guilty for the murder of Bjorn Faulkner. Please follow the bailiff.
Right this way.
was called to examine the body of Bjorn Faulkner. I found the body mangled to an extreme degree.
Crashed into a pavement as cold as this woman's heart.
Well, he was a bit tight. He wasn't very steady on his feet. Mr. Faulkner and the other gentleman had to help him. They almost dragged him into the elevator.
She's hoisting a man's body up on a parapet. A man in evening clothes. Faulkner. He's unconscious. No resistance. She pushes him with all her strength. He goes over the parapet. Down. Into space.
I found only two enjoyable things on this earth whose every door was open to me. My whip over the world and Karen Andre.
He had a platinum gown made for her. She wore it on her naked body, and if it burned her shameless skin, she laughed like the pagan she is. And he'd kiss the burn, wild like a tiger.
We were planning to have a modest little home with a bright kitchen and a flower garden. We'd be so happy there, just the two of us, until we had little ones to take care of.
My business acumen would have prevented the crash, had Faulkner lived.
Faulkner shrugged and said lightly, "Oh, commit suicide." Herr Whitfield looked at him and said very slowly, "If you do, be sure you make a good job of it."
Bjorn Faulkner never thought of things as right or wrong. To him, it was only you can or you can't. He always could. To me, it was only he wants or he doesn't.
But do you think we're both so low that if something passes us to which one kneels, we no longer have eyes to see it? I loved her. She loved Faulkner. That's our only proof.
We cannot pass judgment on Karen Andre without passing it on Bjorn Faulkner.
Mr. Bailiff, bring the jury back. Mr. Bailiff, has the jury reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor.
The defendant will rise and face the jury. What say you?
We have found the defendant not guilty.
Ladies and gentlemen, this court is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Only one? Yeah, but well, so before we started, like during the rehearsal, we kept saying that we'll keep track of how many whichever side wins, everybody's gonna sign the gavel and they get to the gavel. So he's 4 now. Or no, 5. It's 5 performances. Tomorrow 2. Yes, 2. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it. See you later. Yes. No. Okay. Oh yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. Did you enjoy?
Oh yeah.
What do you think? Guilty, not guilty.
I think that they got the right one. I did want to see what the other ending was considering Kaylee. I was really happy to outrage fire.
Yeah.
And then it was a guilty.
The one that we went to was the steakhouse, right? They also have a pizza or burger or something. Yeah, Fire. There's something. Fire Gen X is the pizza. Fire. That was super good. Walk safe. See y'all later.
Do we have time for that though, or?
Kaylee's there till when? I asked if she had a timeline in mind, and she said no.
What are you and Josh doing after the show? Are you guys going to the bar or anything?
No idea yet.
Is Josh working?
No, not tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to go straight over to karaoke last night.
What's your plans after this?
I'm hungry. I'd like to eat
That's what
something.
we were just
Yeah, we were just
Yeah.
trying to figure out.
Did you?
I don't care where we go, so do not ask me.
We were just eyeballing fire because it was so good last time.
Yeah, for the pizza one?
The steakhouse one. But we haven't done the pizza one. I just we did pizza.
Well, it's the same. It's the same order.
Yeah. So I'm sure it's good. Yeah. It's just we get pizza out. Especially the end of the year. Yeah. He went that way. You look at Josh? Yeah, he went that way.
We'll wait for you. Okay.
Yeah, let me give Kaylee a call and see if she's good. Is that cool?
Yeah,
You guys?
fine.
I mean, and I'm up for whatever. I'm sure if the pizza one has something besides pizza.
The old man's killer.
No, the pizza is good, but I can.
Great.
Are you tired? The children haven't.
Our kids haven't killed you yet?
I know.
Yeah.
It's a completely different show from the first one. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me borrow. Tomorrow was the first one, and I'm like, it's a whole different show from the first show.
Just based on the information from the woman from the audience, it's like,
Just wanted to double check everything. Well, she was saying that, like, she gave up information without thinking about it that led to
For them
his
to come
death.
up with that
So
plan
she is
to
going
get
to
her
make
out.
that
That was like, we need to recess and reinvestigate this case.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Would have been better if the daughter got it.
well, if we're going to, should we start walking out?
What's it like? Oh, they're awful people.
Yeah, I'm gonna go change. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.
Always.
Bye, guys.
So much. Sitting outside, was so intense. Everybody's like, right there.
It was unanimous, man.
I haven't seen you in a long time. Like a while back, you posted about your coworkers that you like have to for the airlines.
Oh yeah.
Was it Millie?
It was unanimous.
You killed it.
I really thought you thought I was
Millie,
at one point where I think you rolled your eyes, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh damn.
I'll tell you, you had me.
I thought I had you. I thought you were on my side. You
I
were
was done. I was all like, yeah.
I was like, shoot, like, I can tell.
There's Cindy that I work with.
I really thought.
Yeah. It is. I thought that was yeah, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. I thought it was just funny. It's a small world, right?
Have a good day.
Stacy!
Oh, sorry, Derek.
Hi, buddy.
Killed it, man.
Hey.
Great job.
You're excellent. And the nice tan you got going on right now.
Yeah,
Very
I
fitting
have-
for your character.
I have a, I gotta go jogging more without a shirt.
Right.
Yeah, with the white suit, it's like kind of like a Hemingway type look.
Good.
I like this.
It was Josh's idea. I found it at Goodwill. Saved my life.
You can wear that too. You
suck, man. See you. Bye. Thanks for coming out. That was good. That was really good. Thanks so much for coming out.
Good job.
Thank you, sir.
You got your Miami Vice thing going on.
I know, yeah. Oh, I like to pick out, whenever I do the clothes shopping, it's alternate random, on the Ross.
I go to the thrift shops where they got.
Great shops, man. Yeah, I love the thrift. That's where I got my suit at Goodwill.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I was,
tonight?
yeah, I was gonna get a brand new one. I was like, no, I'm gonna go real quick. It was great. Because I'm
There's like white darkness and light.
Nice contrast. I keep that in mind.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Awesome.
See you guys.
Awesome show.
Thank you, sir.
Good job.
Thank you, ma'am. Messenger. Good night.
Is the house empty besides us?
Almost. Well, pretty much.
Yeah.
Cool, but yeah, the website next week, everything will be on there, so you can see everything. Mads, did you get a ride? Is someone right?
Yeah. No, my mom can drive me.
Okay. I know you were asking earlier. So.
Yeah. She's very bipolar.
I got you.
Huh?
Yeah, you missed it.
I'm not like absolutely.
You like it?
Yeah, I did. It was really good.
Good, buddy.
Yeah, I didn't even play so long.
Yeah, that's pretty much all we do now. Next one will be in December. It's called One Christmas Eve at the Evergreen Mall. Family show. I like it. It's really funny. It takes place like this rundown mall. There's little vignettes that happen throughout it. So there's like a high school couple that breaks like their baby head, and so they end up stealing the baby Jesus out of the manger.
My mom.
Yeah, it's just a lot of random things
Thank
that
you.
happen. There's a mall cop always trying to arrest everybody.
Alright, cool.
So.
I was really looking forward for an excuse to go home. It's okay.
Sorry to ruin it.
No, my godfather and dad are here, so we'll probably have a very good.
Sounds like a good time. Just one.
Did you stage
Hopefully.
manage?
That never works. It never happens.
No, I thought you said Bree was waiting to stage manage.
Right?
Yeah, it's what changes to you. He takes forever to do anything. So who is this interview for this show? Richards. Oh, the guy that was like no, the one we were talking to, the guy behind us that was watching us.
Yeah.
Every phone you left out back there.
Just leave lots up here.
Should I leave my number with you guys?
Oh, yes,
yeah, you
please,
can just put it on the
thank you.
table, please. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
I want to say this is Brayton's water.
No, he said that way.
Yeah, it was sitting right here. So.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure it's Brayton's. Brayton's on the chair.
Thank you.
Together.
One more show tomorrow. Do you have a pizza?
Bitch.
preference?
What are you wearing?
What?
I like pizza.
Why are you wearing
Yeah, I'm
lady
gonna
type
schedule the order for tomorrow. Just gotta make sure I have some things.
You want my skin game?
Yeah.
I'm in theater. You should
I'll
expect
probably
this shit.
participate in one of the slices of her veggie.
Yeah, I'll probably do like 2 veggies, 2 pepperonis, and 2 like
Is
cheeses.
Santa one of the characters?
In that show? Yeah, Santa's actually kind of, it's not really depressing, that section. It's actually really heartfelt because like him and like the elf, it's like a closing time and they talk about life and what's going on with them. It's actually really good. My favorite are the 2, my favorite's the mall cop. There's an actor that doesn't want to perform, and the two teenagers are really funny that steal the baby Jesus.
Oh, that's the one
Babe.
I read, and